Hello, and welcome to My Counselor Live. My name is Brittany East, and if you have ever wondered how God's love can affect how you view your own guilt and shame, then this episode is for you. Joining me today is one of our wonderful licensed therapists, Scott Makin. He is so eager to dive into a parable that you think you probably know, but there's so much more to it. And before we get into that, though, Scott, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself for those viewers who haven't met you yet?
Yes, I'd love to. So I have been in counseling for about 30 years, not in counseling, but being counseling for other people. And so I graduated from Houghton College in New York and then Trinity with a master's outside of Chicago. And actually was in higher education for about 13 years. And then I went to a large church and founded a counseling center for 21 years. And then Dr. John Townsend, who wrote Boundaries, was a good friend of mine. And so together we started a graduate program for counseling and leadership and coaching. And so I did that with him for about 7 years. And then just this February, I officially retired, but I'm doing just some different things here and there. MyCounselor.Online is one of them that I really enjoy doing. So that's kind of my background. More important, I'm married, have 3 grown kids and 7 grandkids. And so
oh my goodness.
So we have a lot of fun. So I have all kinds of things in my backyard. I have about an acre, and so I have zip lines and trampolines and go-karts and swings and stuff like that. So it's fun.
Well, it sounds like you're a really fun grandpa. And I'm so excited to sit down with you today. We're so lucky. I feel like you have such a wealth of knowledge and just deep conviction. So I'm really excited to see how our audience can really learn from you. Yeah. So your article today is titled Parable of the Prodigal Son, a Mismatching Experience. So what inspired you to write this article?
One of my mentors in graduate school, this was one of his favorite parables, and he was able to bring a lot of different things out of it. And so I've always really enjoyed it quite a bit. And so I am always looking for ways in scripture that really reflect some very healthy principles of growth that don't jump out at you. And scripture really is mainly about God restoring his good creation. It's not a textbook for counseling or a textbook for leadership. So this one just provided that opportunity quite a bit. And so I love some of the things I was able to just kind of see in there of what's going on underneath.
Yeah, I definitely, there was so many layers to it, a lot of new stuff. So yeah, I'm so eager for everyone to learn from this with us. So when you wrote the article, did you have a specific audience in mind that you were hoping this would reach?
I think anyone that is struggling with shame. And so it can be, whether it's, whatever stage of life that you're in. So, but it was geared more to adults. I really need to redo it for like teenagers, and then redo it for, I with my 7 grandchildren, I've started to redo it so it's at their level too.
Wow. That's awesome. So in your article, and this term was actually new for me, so I hadn't heard this term before, you talk about mismatching experiences. Can you explain like what a mismatching, like what that is?
Okay. So in the psychology field, there's another term called corrective emotional experience. Okay. And so they are very similar, if anyone happens to know that. Very simply, it's a fancy word for practical grace, because grace is not getting what we normally think we would get or deserve, some kind of punishment or people withdrawing from us. And so often those are very powerful experiences. So in growing up, you will have these different emotional experiences that develop deep neural pathways.
Mm,
Um, and so at times, like in my life, my dad was a good, loving father, but he also was very stern, strict disciplinarian that had expectations for high performance.
yeah.
And so when I didn't reach that, unfortunately, he would withdraw his
Mm,
love and he'd be disappointed. So I learned that I have to perform and be the good kid in order to be okay. And so when I wasn't, then a lot of shame happened. Often we think, well, if you want to change that, because then later on it can lead to depression or anxiety, that you just have to kind of realize that no, you're a child of God and you're
mm,
important and worthwhile. Well, this parable will show that you have to have an experience, a different experience, and it has to be relational. We often can only experience God's love to the degree that we've experienced the intimacy with another human being.
mm,
And that's why the body of Christ, when Jesus left, he gave the body of Christ so that we can experience this way that will allow us to connect more uh, with God's love. And that's really why God sent Jesus, because we needed to have him in our human experience. So the main way that he's designed our brains is if well, I've had quite a few experiences now where I've really have messed up and the other person actually draws closer to me instead of
mm,
trying to fix me. That boy, that was really difficult. You really didn't hit those numbers, or you said a really harsh thing to your kids, and I can tell that that's really hard. And it was like, yeah, but it was
mm,
really bad. And then, yeah, it was bad, but they would keep being close, and
mm,
not, so hey, shouldn't we be working on fixing me up? So that when I'm feeling the shame, um, in that moment, and there's a different experience, that's how our brains kind of recalibrate. So this gets in our brains, and with the latest in neuroscience, it actually deletes the original core emotional learning. And that really is kind of the neurology behind what Paul said on Romans 12:1, the renewing of your mind. It
mm.
can be renewed with new experiences. So mismatching experiences, I got something different for my friend than what I expected to get that's deeply embedded in my personality. And that is where the healing begins.
Yeah, that is a really great experience. I feel like there's explanation, and I feel like I understand it a lot more now. And I mean, I definitely got that, and I had not noticed that before when I read. I mean, I read that parable many
Mhm.
times as well, but just really digging deep, even into like the personalities of both sons, really, but that they really
Yes.
both identified their worth and their identity in performance. Like I
Yeah.
never caught that
Hmm. Hmm.
before, and that was really um I think it just really hit me in a different way because I feel the same way. Like it's something I'm
Yeah.
working on as well, to not draw my worth and identity from my performance. And so really even seeing that, because this has been written so many years ago, it's just like so amazing to see like God like
Hmm.
knows the human condition, like knows what we
Hmm.
tend to do out of our brokenness. And like that was just, yeah, amazing to see that and to see how kind of what you talked about, that mismatched experience, which we're going to talk about, specifically those mismatched
Right. Hmm.
experiences, like how you're right, like it that relational experience like changed how the
Hmm.
sons reacted.
Yes.
So it was amazing. So can you kind of break down like when you, so we, generally I think most people know the parable of the prodigal son, but the specific mismatched experiences that are found within
Right.
that parable?
Hmm. So the first one is when the son says, "I want my inheritance." In the Jewish culture, he is saying, "I wish you were dead, Father."
Mm,
And so there is his anger and hate towards the father because he misunderstands the father's heart. He thinks the father, it's all about performance. And if it's about performance, the elder son beats him hands down.
Mm.
So he can feel, I don't belong here. I'm not as important. So the father in the Jewish culture would never, ever give him the inheritance. And so that's a mismatching experience, that he honors the younger son's feelings, even though that they're immature and rebellious, that he hears and sees how upset that he is, and so he honors that. The second and more powerful one is when the son returns, and you have to realize he rehearses a repentance speech, and we think, oh, his heart has changed. His heart hasn't changed. He's just hungry.
Yeah, that was really new for me to realize too, because I think in the past I've always felt that, oh yeah, he's repenting. He's like, the son has realized all that he's done, so that's why he's hitting back. But you're reading it through the lens of really breaking it down and understanding Jewish culture. Like, you're absolutely right. It was, no, he was hungry and he was clever. Like, it wasn't like he was an idiot. He was like, oh, I know a way to get back. But yeah, just, I mean, I know people can read the article to dive deeper, but just even how he didn't really want to be a part of the family going back. He just wanted a job so that he was fed and clothed. Like, it wasn't like, I want to be back with my family for the love. It was, I want to be back so that I'm secure again with my, so.
And you're right. And so that's very important to realize, that things really haven't changed with him. So the interesting thing is, one, the father is looking for him on a regular basis. Two, the father doesn't have a clue of how he really feels, because it doesn't matter if he's repented or not. And so when the father runs, Jewish men do not run, because they would have to hike up their garment, and you don't show your ankles in the Jewish culture. And he would have to have run through the village. And so the shame would be through the roof for him to do that, because they already think it was stupid that he gave them all the money. Now he's going back. So the son then sees him doing this, and he's still thinking in those old emotional learnings that, well, he's coming out and he's going to lecture me. The father immediately creates an experience. He doesn't use words. Just like Jesus did with the woman at the well in a lot of ways. And he embraces him, calls for the robe, and they're going to throw a feast, because the son is coming back as he is. He doesn't have to be as he should be. And so that's what, in the moment, he then experiences dad's love that's not dependent on his performance. And he only can experience that in the moment of disappointing dad, which is a really hard thing for us to do. So that's the mismatching experience, that then he actually changes the rehearsed speech and leaves the last part off, which was the performance part. And so that was the real key thing along those lines. So
but I think I forgot, like, even just kind of like you talked about, like that first action of him running to his son, like, it wasn't just eagerness. Like, I think in the, when we read that quickly, we can think, especially from our American perspective,
oh yes,
I mean, oh, he's so excited to see his son because he loves him so much, but really it was so intentional to take on that guilt and that shame, so that when the son walked back with him, the son wasn't carrying any of that guilt and shame anymore. It was the father who took it on first. And it really just struck me, I don't know, just like so deeply, just because I feel like, obviously we talk a lot about that. I mean, that God wants to do that guilt and shame typically don't even come, it's not really God's heart. But I think especially within a Christian community, I think we can feel that a lot of times, like, no, I should feel guilty. I should feel ashamed. Type thing.
It's just a slight different than what you said, which means it very significant. It's not so much that the father took on the guilt and shame. It was that the father can be close to you in the midst of you being bad or doing a bad thing. Because you're right. It's like, well, Jesus has taken that on. And so it still is in a subtle way. He's taken it on, but as long as we're in it, I can't feel his closeness. The key is, he was able to draw close to the smell of pigs, which was offensive to him, and he could feel the son's still anger and manipulation, but he could still draw close so that he would feel dad loves me, even those bad parts of me. And
Thank you for
that's
clarifying
the
that, 'cause
key.
you're right.
And that's where we miss that piece, because all we experience is people withdrawing in the midst of that. And we work really hard to get rid of these bad things. And actually, that's not the point.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I, just really appreciate you just kind of reminding us that even healing, even going to see a counselor, going to, getting help for just a lot of maybe anxiety and depression that we're dealing with, that may come from a lot of guilt and shame, like that healing becomes because we're meeting with another person and just building that safe relationship, and that someone's willing to sit in with us without judgment, you know what I mean? With just to be there. And that God can really work. I think sometimes, at least for me, in the past, before I kind of understood more about God's heart, or even stood more about like the mental health community and, counseling, that it kind of felt like it was, you had to choose, either heal by God or heal with counseling. But really God, which I love about the, even the mission about NCO, is it's about drawing from God, like letting God use the counseling to heal people, because God wants people to heal in relationship and everything. So I just really appreciate, thank you for making sure that was the clarity, is that is because he was there and present, that could take place. So what final piece of advice would you give to people who are watching this?
I would say, find safe people. And for me, it takes about 15 to 20 people that I go through to find someone who's safe. So it is not easy. And so as I share some different things and all of a sudden I get advice or judgment, I got to move on. I mean, it's like what Jesus said to the disciples: you enter a house, they're not welcoming. Put the dust off your sandals. So find a safe place. And then this is the hard part, is to get over the shame. You have to bring those parts that feel the worst that you've done, so that they can draw close and you have a new experience that begins to get deeply in your brain. And so you have to feel it in the moment, this badness. And then you have to let the other good stuff in, even though it's so foreign and you kind of want to push it out. And that will help that shame. And shame drives a ton of depression, a ton of anxiety, a ton of addiction. And so that would help quite a bit.
Well, thank you, Scott. I really appreciate that. And I know our audience is definitely, I feel like I've already benefited from our little discussion here. And I'm really eager for people, just what they're going to be able to walk away from with this. So we're actually in a transition now. Each episode we have a trending topic we cover. And this week's trending topic is the boundaries in parent-child relationships. So Scott, what are signs of unhealthy boundaries between a parent and their child?
Our culture, unfortunately, has messed this up quite a bit, where there aren't a lot of good boundaries. And so when I hear from parents of, my kids are my best friend, that is not a good thing, because you are using them for that, and you should have other relationships that you get that from. As parents say, well, this is what I'm going to do for them just to help out so they don't, it's really hard for them. What happens is they come in so the child doesn't experience difficult things, or they take ownership. And so when I start hearing that they do all these things for the kid, that's not really good boundaries.
Okay.
Or when the child is angry and upset at them, it overwhelms them. Well, that's not good boundaries, because all of their worth is tied up on how my child feels about me. And that's where a lot of us get, we want the trophy child. And so we invest all this. So when I hear those things, those are just three of about 25 other things out there that I hear that it's kind of like, that's not real good, even though they think that's a great thing, that, oh, I am best friends with my kid, and that's a proud thing. That's an awful thing.
Why do you think it can be like a problem to be like a best friend then? Or how do you think parents can be friends then with their child, but kind of still have that line?
That's a great question. Here's the problem is with all of those is the child doesn't grow up. And so it's like, oh, the child is very weak. He can't do this. He can't tolerate all this pain.
I see.
And so then the child gets to be very fragile. And so the world is a lot bigger than the child, because the child's so small, and the child is either a sense of entitlement that you should, employers, everyone should cater to me, or they are really small, get depressed and really anxious because I can't handle the world. So that's why when you are a hovering parent, or you're a parent that always wants closeness, it doesn't allow strength to be developed or differentiation for the child, and they are very weak and are not able to take initiative, because the parent always takes the initiative.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as, obviously boundaries are going to look different between, parent and toddler, parent and adult child. So as, children are becoming adults, like what advice would you give to parents, like in terms of boundaries in their relationships, to like kind of, change as needed or to help with that?
So I think that I still will have the boundaries is when the child is in my house of expectations of different things.
Okay.
But I also emphasize, I heighten how they're different than I. You like this kind of food, you like this kind of clothing, and I think that's really stupid. But they still feel that I'm close to them. So that allows them to establish their own boundaries. And then when they choose to disobey, I just create loss. I don't try to lecture them. I don't try to, okay, this is what we need to do. They usually can figure that out. I create loss so that life is miserable, and they have that remorseful kind of, boy, this didn't really work out as well as what I expected. When they, they've graduated from college, or even high school, and they're out on their own.
Yeah.
I may see a lot of things that I don't agree with.
Right.
It's their life. And I can't come in and rescue when there's difficulties. I come alongside and I will listen. But I always have to balance on, they need to have friends, they need counseling, they get counseling. So I'm alongside, but I'm one of many.
Yeah.
And so often I hear from parents of, either they should do these things, their kids, and I keep challenging them. That's crossing boundaries
Okay.
that are, it doesn't let them grow up, or they're going to resent that and move further away from you.
That's a good insight. So on the flip side though, so say, as an adult, you feel like you're trying to create healthy boundaries, but your parents, kind of want to keep kind of crossing those boundary lines.
Right.
Like, how do you, so what advice would you give to like the adults who's trying to help their parent, like respect their boundaries?
Right. So I can tell you some ideas,
Okay.
but you have to, the person has to um, grow in their sense of separation, that
Okay.
I'm different, that I can be okay as I'm different than mom and dad, in their own authority, that instead of feeling one down, they feel more mutual. And so often when people come in and that's the issue with parents trying to control them and so on and so forth, we'll listen to that, but it will always back into, I help them grow in their separation. So I'm okay if I'm not liked. I'm okay if I'm different. I'm okay, and this is the tough part, even when someone's angry at me. That's a tough one, even for me now. And I'm okay if a person in authority doesn't like me. I'm okay if I choose not to do what an authority person or an authority system says. And so if I grow in those things, then it will be easier for me to say, Mom and Dad, I know you think that we should not buy that house, but this house because of this, this, and this. We really enjoy that house and we really want that house. And they may say, yeah, but the sewer system is, I understand that, but we really enjoy that house and that's exciting for us. But do you realize the neighbors that you have? Yes, I know the neighbors are loud and I know they party a lot. So whatever the biggest fear is, but we really enjoy that house and are looking forward to be in that house. And if that doesn't take care of it, then I would say, so Mom, I know you have a different opinion. I've heard those things. And so I think I'm at the point that I don't need to hear anymore. Let's talk about something else.
Okay.
And so, and if they, okay, fine. I know that you're angry and you don't like that. But I still like to talk about something else so that they know their anger and disgust doesn't overwhelm me. But all of that, if someone can say that, then you're in great shape. But most can't. You've got to grow in these other things. And you always have to have support. I've got to have people that are, are supportive, that, yeah, you should do that, instead of the people of, hey, they're your parents, and you got to respect them. And, it's you got to listen to them. You want the other kind that says, no, Jesus, God said, leave and cleave. And he wants us to have strong and be strong adults, and parents need to not get their identity from their kids.
Yeah, I love all of that. That was really well
Yeah.
said. And it just seems like for both people, just having their own sense of identity, whether you're the parent or the
Yes.
child, it's just so important. Like, it's not about like, they're not supposed to really be melding into one person or one personality, but really having their own individual sense of self is where a lot of these boundaries, like healthy boundaries, seem to stem from.
Yeah. And actually, that is the nature of reality, because God could have just been one God, but he's three in one. So see, naturally, there's two things that, because he's three in one, I mean, he was pretty smart to be this way. I don't know. Is that one, the other nature is relationships. The Holy Spirit, God, and Jesus, relationships are key. They interact, and then they are very different. And that's also part of reality, that you are close, but you have distinct differences and boundaries between you. And that's, so it's just built into the fabric of nature. which we then distort. And our culture distorts it a lot, both relationships and boundaries. We're
Yeah.
very superficial in relationships, especially with all of the gaming and you know,
Social.
internet and
Oh yeah.
yeah, social media, and then all these activities, instead of just hanging out like I used to do as a kid growing up on the front porch and we just talk.
Yeah.
Just doesn't happen. And then boundaries, we're so enmeshed with our kids, and so that doesn't help either.
Yeah, nope, that all makes sense. I'm like, man, I want to like dive deeper into this, but I know it's just our trending topic. It's just a little blurb this week.
Oh,
So we're actually going to transition into our Q&A. So these are questions that actually have been submitted by you guys, the viewers, to us, which we love hearing. It gives us insight into ways that we can help you better. And we want to provide answers to you in a way that's absolutely anonymous. So no one's going to know who's asking this question. But it also can help more people in our audience to kind of understand any of the topics that really can be covered within therapy. So if you go to MyCounselor.Online/ask, you can submit these questions and they'll be added into future episodes. So Scott, our first question this afternoon says, I grew up in a family that didn't process hard emotions, and the tendency was to sweep them under the rug. Now that I am a parent, how can I break this cycle and help my children learn to process hard emotions rather than avoid them?
That's a great thing that you realize that. So that tells me a lot about where you're at. And so then I'm assuming that you're comfortable with your own emotions. And if you're not, you need to do that first, because it will be hard to do what I'm going to suggest next. And so one of the most powerful friendship relation skill is called, some call it empathy, I call it attunement, where if someone shares that, I lost my dog and we were really close and I really miss him, that you would say, well, I can tell how sad that is for you, and how kind of lonely. Attunement focuses on what emotion you see in the other person.
Okay.
And all you do is you just say that emotion, often in different words than they use, so they can feel the natural flow of this. And so, so you just watch and catch your children in different emotional states, which will not be hard to do.
Yes.
And so you just reflect back of, you're really upset because I've asked you to make sure your room is clean. You're really sad that your brother won't play with you. And then they will naturally start to talk about their emotions. Yes, I really like my brother and I feel like he doesn't like me when he plays. Do not fix.
Okay.
Do not give advice, okay? Because it will work itself out. So don't say, well, he really does love you. Then they don't feel the connection, okay? And so what they will do is they won't share the feelings, because you then basically are saying, don't feel that way, by saying, he really
Okay.
feels. You say, their feelings are reality to them. And just say, I know that's really disappointing that he doesn't want to play with you. And it feels like he doesn't like you. And that's kind of hard because you really like him. And so he will, then say, yeah, I do. And when we play this, this, and this, it's really fun. I know it really is. When you're out in the slide with him, you guys are laughing. Yeah, you're right. And then all of a sudden they'll say, I'm hungry. What can I go eat? All of a sudden they get enough connection. They're okay. If if you go, I might even send this link to you. There is a episode in the movie Inside Out where sadness and joy are coming alongside. I think it's Billabong when all his stuff was pushed over.
Yeah.
Joy's giving advice, but sad. And so Billabong, it's, got to get to the train, and sadness just sits there and it says, yeah, that's awful. That's awful. And then all of a sudden Billabong says, okay, let's go to the train. That is that's a great clip. If you just Google on YouTube, just go on YouTube, Billabong, sadness and joy, it'll come up. So that is the most powerful way, is you catch them in those different feelings and you just listen and you don't solve. Okay. At the end of some of those, you can say, well, next time, maybe if you try this, and it's all tentative. And then it goes off of, oh, I already did that. So it's really hard, isn't it? And then they just need to have a place to be understood. So that will allow them that feelings are safe. Mom and dad are okay with that. So for me, I also look for the bad feelings. They're angry, they're hateful, they mess up, and so I need to draw into those feelings so they know negative feelings are okay also. Well, my daughter, she was the youngest, and she was, I've got to be the good kid, and so I'm always looking for ways so she can feel you're okay even if you aren't a good kid. And so she didn't give me too many opportunities because she was a great student, great athlete, all of that. One day she was at a junior high football game and someone had these laser pin things and they were shining it on the field, and they passed it down, and then it got to her and she had it, and the referee for some reason stopped the whole game, pointed to her and said, "You're out." I happened to be at home, so she comes home crying, and I'm saying, "This is my chance." And
Finally.
I said, "That must have been so embarrassing." Instead of, the other part of me is, "What were you thinking? Don't you realize next time you got to know, you just don't even see, all that would reinforce the other performance. You got to be good." And so, that's embarrassing. I know you're really sad that, it looks like you're this bad kid and everyone thinks you're this bad kid because you got kicked out of the game. And that's a really hard place to be. So she would then be a little bit easier at sharing negative feelings with me. So.
No, I really appreciate that. It seems like really, to help kids process, or to help them feel comfortable, really processing hard emotions. It's really about like helping them to identify and not fixing, but I think is hard for me. I think, as a parent, a lot of times I'm like, okay, well, I did the identifying, so now I'm going to fix it because we identified it already. But really just stopping there. And it sounded, kind of going back to even our talk about boundaries between parent and child, it sounds like that really helps to kind of build up that own child's resilience and their own sense of identity, even within their own emotions.
So you're catching on really well. You're going to move from the interviewer to counselor pretty soon. So you're absolutely right. It does all those things that you mentioned.
Yeah. And I really like that piece too, about not being caught off guard when kids, you're talking, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm hungry." I'm like, because my son does that a lot. He's 5.5. And sometimes I'm like, wait, did I say the wrong thing? Is he cutting me off? I feel like as adults, we do that. We're kind of like, okay, you're right. We're just done talking. But really kind of what you talked about, it's like their brain processed and they're ready to move on. Like they're not concerned anymore.
As long as you were attuning. If you're not attuning, it is, "I'm tired of getting all the advice. I'm getting the heck out of here." So, and a lot of kids will do that. It's like, yeah, they're not listening and I'm out. But when you're attuned, it's a good thing. So
it's good to know. Well, our second question kind of goes into more just that connection. So it says, I struggle to connect with others in groups of people. I always have my guard up. How can I take my guard down and genuinely connect with others?
um, if you have more experiences with safe people of taking your guard down, it will spill into other people in your life.
Okay.
So, so finding some safe people, and again, this is where sharing some of those not so lovely parts come in,
Yeah.
because part of the reason that it's reluctant to share with other people is we're going to be judged. And so if I have experiences now where people draw close to these bad parts of me, bad actions, thoughts, feelings, then I'm not as resident to share, because I know that those are okay because I have these other experiences. So I will share in a group, and I will be more readily to share in the group. And if for some reason the group isn't safe and someone says something, I have enough of these other experiences, or I'll call these people when I leave. Okay, just shared this. This person thought I was like, going to hell. What do you, and my friend will say, well, they're nuts. You've talked to me about that. We're good. We're good. So that will help. So that more I get comfortable that way, that will bleed over. But often the reason we don't share is either it's a shame, or it can be this other piece, this I don't want to be different because I haven't learned to separate. So I don't share because I want to be liked and I want to not be different. So if you work on that part in you, in safe relationships, that they love that you're different, and that you can be angry, that will help too. So working on some of those deeper parts will make it easier to do the behavior.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on to our show. It has been, I feel so edified just sitting on talking with you. I'm so excited for future episodes where you get to come and share your wealth of knowledge, and not just knowledge, but it seems like you just have such a genuine heart to want people to heal, to want people to just experience God the way that he wants to connect with people, just relationally, with genuine grace and forgiveness. So I just really appreciate that.
So I'm glad you caught that. I love to help people heal. So in the beginning of our talk, you mentioned about an area that you're growing in, as opposed to that got triggered by the parable of the prodigal son. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. My performance identity. Yeah.
Right. So if you want to grow in that, this would be what I would suggest to you is put yourself in mismatching experiences where, and this, I'm a performer too, so this will be excruciating for you, okay? But you do it with safe people that I share a mistake or when I was mediocre. And so, hey, I really yelled at my kids. So you can then feel they can get close to you, even though that unbelievable. She yelled at her kids. She even called them this name. She swore at them, and they can get closer. You'll then begin to slowly switch to, instead of the good self, performing self, it's a love self that even with these imperfections, but you only can do that if you have different experiences. And so I also tell those who are highly perfectionistic that you need to make a mistake once a week. Okay, because see, there's nothing for them to share. They never make a mistake. So So they have to make a mistake and then share that with a safe person. They then begin to see, oh, I can be loved even if I'm imperfect. So
I love that. Yeah. My husband and I had a really long conversation about this, like the night before my birthday, actually. I was struggling with the mistake I made. Shocker.
Yes.
And we talked through it. So it was actually really great.
Okay. So there's one other caveat is your husband doesn't count. You have to get a safe person outside of your husband.
Okay.
And that's always the tough part. And then if you don't have a safe person, then you work at finding a safe person. So anyways, I thought I'd make it a little bit more personal for you.
No, I appreciate that.
I'm sure the viewers will get a kick out of this. Oh my stars. He's trying to do something with her. Heck yeah, why not?
No, I appreciate that. And so for all of our viewers, if everyone's watching, and like I said, I'm sure you got something out of this. If you have your own questions you would like answers, don't forget to submit them to MyCounselor.Online/ask. And if you are not already following us on social media, you can find us on Facebook if you search Love My Counselor. On Instagram, our handle is the same at Love My Counselor. And on YouTube, you can search MyCounselor.Online Christian Counseling. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week for another episode of My Counselor Live.